My name is Kevin B. Burke, and I'm the author of Statistical Astrology, the use of irregular seasonality in quantitative time series analysis and forecasting. The overall objective of the study is to address the inherent limitations of the current approach to seasonality in statistics. The noise, the random, irregular component of a decomposed time series, is not nearly as random as it appears. Let's start by exploring the idea of seasonality and why it matters in time series forecasting. On the most basic level, time series forecasting is based on the theory that past performance is a reliable indicator of future outcomes. The idea is that if patterns repeat consistently in the historical data, they can be expected to continue in the future. There are two important challenges with seasonality. First, we need to be able to see the seasonal patterns in the data. Second, we need to be able to evaluate if those patterns are likely to improve the accuracy of the forecasts. The current approach to seasonality never considers the second challenge and approaches the first challenge from the wrong direction. Seasonality as it's currently defined looks for periodic fluctuations in the time series data. The current approach to seasonality focuses primarily on the fluctuations and not on the periods. It effectively treats seasonality as if it were a quality of the data. And it does this because it starts with the data. You, or your algorithm of choice, look at the time series data searching for patterns of peaks and troughs. These patterns are analyzed to see if they correspond with any calendar or clock divisions of time based on divisions of the calendar year. This is usually expressed as some kind of harmonic pattern. Then it's either included in the forecast or eliminated from the forecast. My research is built on the idea that seasonality is a quality of time, not of data. Now, this is semantically obvious. The term seasons refers to periods of time. If you approach seasonality from this perspective, you start with time. You choose a seasonal model, overlay it on the data, and consider which, if any, of the seasons show a consistent significant effect. We can quantify the effect size using Cohen's d, which objectively evaluates the difference between two means. In this case, we're looking at the mean of the values during the individual season, and the reference mean of the values for the entire calendar year. I make one significant change to the effect sizes. I also include the direction of the effect. If the seasonal mean is higher than the reference mean, the effect is positive. If the seasonal mean is lower than the reference mean, the effect is negative. This has never been necessary before because generally you only have a single effect size for any data set. But when evaluating the effect size of seasonal influences, we have multiple effect sizes for each data set. And classifying those effect sizes as either higher or lower than the reference mean gives a more accurate picture of the seasonal patterns. Let's consider this with some actual data. One of the data sets included in my study is 30 years of flight departure data from the Department of Transportation. Any flight that pushes back from the gate more than 15 minutes after the scheduled departure time is classified as late. Flight on-time performance has a strong monthly seasonal component. Historically, the greatest percentage of flight delays occurs in the month of December, and some of the best on-time performance occurs in September. We would expect to see this reflected in the seasonal effect sizes of the flight data, and we do. These are the results for flight delays in December from 1988 through 2017. The actual difference column is the difference between the percent of late departures during the season and the percent of late departures for that year. The percent difference column is the percent difference between the two means. The percentage of late flights in December was greater than the annual percentage of late flights 28 out of 30 years. There are 8 very large effects, 9 large effects, and 7 medium effects, all in a positive direction, meaning a greater than average percentage of late departures. These are the results for flight delays in September from 1988 through 2017. The percentage of late flights in September was lower than the annual percentage of late flights every single year. There are 15 large effects, 12 medium effects, and 3 small effects, all in a negative direction. The amount of data is a little impractical, however. If you wanted to get an overall analysis of the patterns of on-time performance over the past 30 years, you'd have to consider 360 seasons, each with its own effect size. To simplify this, the individual seasonal results can be aggregated using weighted averages, and a single effect size can be determined by comparing the weighted seasonal mean to the weighted reference mean. This way, we can view the average seasonal effects of the entire dataset. Here are the results for the calendar month seasonality for the flight on-time performance dataset. Now keep in mind, the actual difference and percent difference columns in this table refer to the weighted means. We can clearly see December has both the largest effect size for flight delays and the greatest percent difference between the seasonal means and the reference means at 29.31%. The next worst month to travel is June. It has only a small effect, but there's a 14.81% greater than average rate of flight delays overall. Both September and October show significant effect sizes with a negative medium effect, but September shows a 26.68% lower rate of delays, while October shows only a 17.56% lower rate of delays. It appears this approach allows us to see the seasonal patterns in the data, so it addresses the first challenge. This is important, because the current approach to seasonality assumes the seasons are limited to calendar and clock-based units of measurement of time. Because of the limitations of how we perceive time, we can only understand time if it's expressed in terms of the calendar or the clock. But the calendar and the clock are not the only ways to measure time. This is a pretty big concept, and I explore it in detail in another video. The current approach to seasonality can be defined as regular seasonality. All of the seasons fit neatly within the calendar year. Each season is uniform in duration, and the seasons repeat every year in the same sequence. In this research, I explore seasonal models based on the cycles of the planet Mercury. These seasons are defined based on the speed, the average daily motion of Mercury, and also the direction of Mercury, either direct or retrograde. I created two seasonal models. The M30 model is based on 30-minute increments of daily motion, and the M15 model is based on 15-minute increments of daily motion. When the speed is combined with the sign of Mercury, the M30 sign and speed series includes 108 individual seasons, and the M15 sign and speed series includes 202 individual seasons. These Mercury-based seasons are examples of irregular seasonality. They're irregular in terms of the duration of each season, and they're irregular in terms of how often they reoccur, because not every season occurs every year. The cycles are definable, and they're observable, and they do repeat, but the pattern of repetition is incredibly complex. I plotted the cycles for a 56-year period from 1975 through 2030. Here are some of the results. The M30 sign and speed seasons can last from 1 to 32 days, but 48.3% of the seasons last from 3 to 7 days. The M15 sign and speed seasons can last from 1 to 27 days, and 59.2% of them last from 1 to 4 days. The M30 sign and speed series has 108 individual seasons. Only 4 of those seasons occur in all 56 years. 63.8% of the seasons occur fewer than 20 times out of the 56-year period. The M15 sign and speed series has 202 individual seasons, and not a single one of them occurs in all 56 years. 2 of them occur in 55 out of 56 years. 53.46% of the M15 seasons occur between 13 and 17 years out of the 56 years. And 1 of them occurs only 4 times over a 56-year period. When we look at the M30 sign and speed seasonal model for the flight on-time performance, we see some of the worst flight delays occur during the Capricorn D3.5 season, which often, but not always, occurs in the month of December. And some of the best on-time performance occurs during the Libra D3.3 season, which often, but not always, occurs in the month of September. We've identified significant seasonal patterns in the flight data. And now we're faced with the second challenge, evaluating whether these patterns are likely to improve the accuracy of the forecasts. The first problem is that while the effect sizes are incredibly useful in time series analysis, they represent relative values. They're all being compared to a reference mean of the total percentage of late flights. That data is not useful when forecasting. Forecasts work in actual values. The forecast has to look at the historical data and predict the actual percentage of late flights for each upcoming season. And there's no way of knowing if that percentage will end up being higher or lower than the annual mean, because we can't know the annual mean in advance. When working with effect sizes, medium or greater effects are usually considered to be significant. It's easy to assume that the seasons with the largest, most significant effects will be the ones with the most value in forecasting. But the truth is that when it comes to forecasting, effect size doesn't matter. The theory of time series forecasting emphasizes historical consistency. The more consistently a pattern repeats in the historical data, the more likely that pattern will continue in the future. We know the Capricorn D3.5 season has a large positive effect and that the Libra D3.3 season has a large negative effect. What we don't know is the pattern behind these effects. To see that, we have to consider the original individual effect sizes for each historical instance of each season. That original data is not useful for historical analysis, but it's the key to addressing the second challenge and identifying which seasons are most likely to be useful in forecasting, because it gives a quick and easy way to evaluate the variance within each season. If the effect sizes of the historical seasons are consistent, if the variance is low, then it's reasonable to expect that season could improve the accuracy of forecasts. If the effect sizes of the historical seasons are inconsistent, if the variance is high, then there's no reason to expect that season will improve the forecast accuracy. Let's take a closer look at the Capricorn D3.5 season. We know over the 30-year data set it has a large positive effect and it represents the period with the greatest percentage of late flights. But look at the historical effect sizes. The variance here is enormous. The percent differences between the means ranges from minus 37.57 to plus 96.84. The effects range from large negative effects to very large and even huge positive effects. They average out to a large positive effect overall, but this season probably won't be useful in forecasting. The actual percentage of late flights varies too much between seasonal instances. Now let's consider the Libra D3.3 season. Over the 30-year data set, it has a large negative effect and it represents a period with better than average on-time performance. When we consider the historical effect sizes, the variance is extremely low. Every one of the effects is in a negative direction, so delays during this season are consistently lower than the mean. The percent differences between the means range from minus 8.02 to minus 40.45%. The percentage of late flights during this season is quite consistent between seasonal instances. So incorporating this data into a forecast will probably improve the forecast accuracy for this season. This effect and variance-based approach to seasonality seems to address both of the challenges. Using this approach allows you to identify the presence of seasonal patterns for time series analysis, and it also allows you to determine which seasons are most likely to improve the accuracy of time series forecasts. Forecasting with irregular seasonal models is its own challenge, because it's impossible to incorporate this complex system of seasons into any mathematical model. The only way to incorporate the seasonal influences in a forecast is to generate a forecast using only the seasonal data, then generate a forecast using a more traditional method, and finally combine the results in some way to create a hybrid forecast that includes the seasonal influences. But here's the really exciting part. You don't have to include the whole seasonal forecast. You can analyze the variance of the seasons for the data set, identify the seasons with the greatest forecast value, and only include the seasonal data for those seasons, leaving the rest of the forecast unchanged. I call this targeted seasonality, and I demonstrate the power and value of it in the forecast portion of the research, which looks at 19 years of quarterly forecasts for 430 individual stocks, index funds, commodities, interest rates, and currency exchange rates. And the overall conclusion is that including the Mercury-based targeted seasonal data improves the accuracy of the forecasts more than 77% of the time.